special meeting. Before the meeting is called to order, I would like to point out a few house rules to assist council members, staff, and members of the public to successfully participate in this meeting. Council members, your microphone is live, so please keep your microphones on mute until you wish to speak. For today's meeting, we are using Zoom to host the City Council special meeting. At the bottom of the Zoom client, there are two icons, chat and raise hand. Please use chat only to report technical issues such as being unable to hear a council member speaking. Please use raise hand to be recognized by the mayor and enabled to speak to the council. To comment under oral communication or on any agenda item, you're allowed 3 minutes to speak per agenda item. Emails limited to 350 words can also be submitted to the city clerk and it will be read into the record. This word limit is set to adhere to the typical 3-minute time allowance. Only attendees using the Zoom application can use the raise hand option to comment. Participants calling in from a telephone will only be able to listen and cannot provide feedback or public comment. Lastly, because we are all not in the same room, all votes at this meeting will be taken by roll call.
Thank you. Welcome to the Monte Sereno meeting. Please go ahead and take the roll.
Councilmember Lawler.
Present.
Councilmember Mekachek.
Present.
Councilmember Turner.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Elahi.
Here.
And Mayor Luthold is not present and we have a quorum.
Yeah, he may join us later, so if he does.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Get him in. Thank you so much. Were there any written communications or comments from the public that you received?
We have not received anything.
All right, so I guess we can go straight to new business. Did the staff have a report on that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This is Steve Leonardo, City Manager. First of all, thank you everybody for Zooming in today. I know this is a special time for us, but this is a very important subject, and we've been working under a very difficult deadline, as you know, trying to achieve this RHNA protest letter between Memorial Day holiday and essentially July 4th holiday. That was the time frame we were given to work with. All the while we are transitioning with our city planner. So it makes it very challenging. However, EMC Group has been very gracious to step up and help us deliver this draft RHNA protest letter on very short order. And we're looking forward to receiving your feedback today. On the phone with us or on the call with us today is Martin Carver. Martin Carver is from EMC, and I'm not sure if there are other members of Martin's team who have also joined the call, but they are here to have a presentation and answer questions. And of course, add whatever kind of amendments are possible to the draft, although we are getting skinny on time. And I know Mr. Rudin has provided some input to Mayor Pro Tem via email here, in very recent correspondence in the last bit of time before our meeting. But I'm hoping that through the discussion today, we will come up with the opportunity to have a finished product or nearly a finished product so we can get it out the door. I told Mr. Carver earlier today that we would like to have it in our hands Wednesday, July 7th, which is about 6 days from now. And of course, remember, we have the July 4th holiday. And we will hopefully get it, or we must get it to RHNA by Friday the 9th. That is our goal. And that concludes my comments. I'm available for questions.
Thank you. And I know we kind of put a rush on you on this, and the timing is like that all of us are not available at this time. And I appreciate your bringing in, making Mr. Carver available so that we could have him discuss it. I know the ad hoc committee may have already met with him, but it'll be great for us to be directly involved. Just at the outset, I did go through the appeal. I think it sets forth the arguments that we were looking at maybe. And I marked it up a little bit so that we could add one argument that I like, and we can discuss all that. So at this point, I guess we'll open it up for discussion for council. Anybody raising their hand or want to have say something about the item? Yeah, Ms. Lawler, please.
Thank you. I believe the consultant was going to do a presentation. Am I correct?
Yes, yes, that's correct. I have a presentation for you this afternoon.
Oh,
Okay.
then would you like to do that first, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much. Steve, thanks for the introduction. Mayor Pro Tem Elahi, members of the City Council. My name's Martin Carver. I'm with EMC Planning Group. And here today, actually in your City Council chambers, hoping to move through this letter, get it in shape so that we can get it out next week. And of course, I want to make mention of Rachel in our office, who actually did most of the heavy lifting on actually preparing the analysis that's contained in this letter, and working with some of the City Council members in the subcommittee to pull this appeal letter together. So with that, let me run through the PowerPoint. It's a little lengthy. I'll be brief though, and we'll get through it. So if we could go to the first slide. Just as background, of course, it was just, a month ago, approximately, where the ABAG Executive Board approved its final allocation methodology and draft RHNA for the jurisdictions. And as is the case for every jurisdiction in California, the numbers are just brutal. For Monte Sereno, a 300% increase. In the last RHNA period, there were 61 units that were needed to be accommodated. Now it's 193. And I can report, I do a lot of housing element work. I work with a lot of jurisdictions across the state, and Monte Sereno is not alone in this predicament. It is just a huge increase and causing a lot of consternation. It's just a lot of work to get through it. So if we could go on to the next slide. I did take a moment to create a table. I don't know if I am completely convinced that it's all that helpful, but I wanted to place Monte Sereno in Santa Clara County. Of all the Santa Clara County jurisdictions, it's actually the smallest numbers in actual numbers, representing about 0.1% of the total for the county. But of course, that belies a whole lot of very special, unique characteristics about Monte Sereno that this appeal letter goes into. So let's go on to the next slide. Rachel, mostly in our office, but all of us, of course, turn to government code for guidance on how to structure the appeal. And in government code, there are certain bases, there's certain ways, certain foundations that you can appeal the RHNA number on. And they include, first of all, ABAG failing to adequately consider local planning that's unique to the jurisdiction, failing to determine the jurisdiction's share of the regional housing need in accordance with the methodology and in a manner that furthers and does not undermine legislative objectives. And then finally, significant and unforeseen change in circumstance. So we've used each of these and have a little bit to say about each. So we'll dive into the details a little bit. So if we can go to the next slide. So the first, ABAG failed to consider local planning factors that are unique. This includes jobs housing balance, lack of transit access, lack of available land in a wildfire zone, seismic hazard. I'm not so sure that seismic hazard really rings too loudly in this letter, but we've left it in there. It's definitely an issue, as it is for so many places in California, and I don't think it hurts. If we can go to the next slide then. Digging into the jobs housing balance a little bit, put simply, Monte Sereno does not have the jobs to support the RHNA allocation of units. It's a residential community only, and a net exporter of workers, of course. The formal ratio of jobs to residents is 0.37. No commercial shopping districts, no mixed use real estate developments that are available to be rezoned as they are in so many places. So this part of it particularly is unique to Monte Sereno. And I know the ABAG methodology throws you in into this mix because you have a certain proximity to downtown San Jose, but in reality, you know, it's about housing here, and more housing, denser housing, simply exacerbates the jobs housing balance. If we could go to the next slide, please. Here's just a chart of that jobs housing ratio. The blue at the bottom of the chart is where Monte Sereno is, and we can move to the next. So lack of access to transit is another. One bus stop, no access to light rail. Not exactly the place that cries out for higher density housing and more housing and the like, because there simply isn't the transit service to really support that type of housing. Next slide, please. Lack of available land suitable for development. Now, this is we were not able to dig too far into this. We have just started the housing element update process. And of course, this is a big part of that update process, really trying to dig down and find suitable sites. We've singled out some that are obvious. ABAG has this housing element site selection tool called the HES tool. And if you turn to the next slide, you'll see a screenshot that I took where the sites come up that are available. There's 7 of them. They're pretty much basically all surrounded by low density residential development. In some cases, there is oak woodland and high slopes on some of them. So not a great selection of land that's suitable for development. We can go to the next slide, please. Wildfire. In our way of thinking, wildfire is actually a very important factor in this appeal. The idea that Monte Sereno is going to put yet more houses in harm's way just stands in contrast to the huge emergency facing the state every year now with wildfire. Approximately half the city is located and is actually designated as a high fire hazard area, and I'll show you a map on the next page. But there's also the rest of the city that's not in that high fire hazard area is still dominated by a lot of large trees on practically every lot with large canopies. So while half the city is not actually mapped as a high fire hazard area, you know, for every intent and purpose, it is with all of those large canopy trees. Evacuation routes are an issue. And with seismic hazards, of course, the San Andreas Fault is nearby. With some of the steep slopes you have, that really creates a potential for earthquake-induced landslides. So we can go to the next slide, which will show the map. Again, this is from the ABAG HES tool. The area in red is the high fire hazard area. The area in yellow is just the rest of the city. So we can move on. The second basis for appeal, ABAG did not determine the jurisdiction's allocation in accordance with its adopted methodology and in a manner that furthers the objectives that are set out in government code. HCD's methodology overestimates statewide housing need, fails to meet jobs housing objective, fails to account for lack of access to transit. And we can dig into each of these a little bit with the next slide. So first of all, looking at this at a statewide basis, there was a very interesting paper that was forwarded to us by one of the council members, if I'm not mistaken, that makes actually a very cogent argument about how the statewide numbers were actually incorrectly calculated, that there was double counting going on, that the methodology incorrectly assumed that existing housing need was not evaluated, so double counting there as well, and then incorrectly assumes that overcrowding was not considered. So for all of these reasons, well, let me even dig into that vacancy rate a bit. This is a big part of the overcount, is that they assumed a healthy vacancy rate for single family housing being 5%. The argument is, and is correct, that really that 5% is meant to apply to rental housing. To have a healthy rental market, 5% is right there in the sweet spot for HCD. But when it comes to single family owner occupied housing, that 5% is way inflated, and a correct healthy rate is closer to 1.5%. This is the argument, one of the arguments made. And of course, that makes a huge difference in the number of statewide units that would be overcalculated. If we can go to the next slide. Here is a chart that comes from that same report. And you can see I've circled in red here the Bay Area, and the very red, top red is cost burden double count. The orange is overcrowding double count, and that makes up sort of the biggest, the next are extra units needed to achieve healthy vacancy rate. If you compare it to what the conventional economists' approach would be for estimating housing need, this paper is making the argument that in the Bay Area alone, that it's overcounted that need by 160,000 units. So that's not a small thing. Next slide, please. Failing to meet the jobs housing objective. We've already talked about this, but we've couched it in terms of this second basis. So we don't really need to talk more about this. We can go to the next slide. Lack of access to transit. We've talked about this as well. The ABAG methodology specifically assumes a 15%, assigns a 15% weight to the way that they assign housing need, and that 15% relates to job proximity by transit. And we think that they could do a better job. In fact, it's unclear in the last round, in the last cycle, apparently Monte Sereno was correctly discounted because of its lack of transit access. In this newest round, there's not actually evidence that that's the case. So we've included this as one of the grounds. Next slide, please. And then the basis 3 for appeal, unforeseen change in circumstances. And really this has to do, again, with wildfire, drought conditions. The drought, the chronic drought that has gone on for how long now? Too long, has just made the area a tinderbox, and that certainly is a change in condition. I mean, it's to go through another year was certainly not anticipated when this methodology was first put forward. So we think that's a solid basis for appeal as well. And then I think the last slide is just a conclusion slide. Monte Sereno is in a very high fire hazard zone. The mountainous terrain, heavily wooded areas, and the prevalence of large canopy trees throughout the community puts the community in harm's way when wildfire hits. This is the wrong place to locate new housing. Monte Sereno is a build-out community with no significant vacant land to develop or redevelop for housing. What little vacant land exists is surrounded by low-density residential development and configured into fairly small parcels that really do not lend themselves to affordability, and land prices alone would make that extremely difficult as well. Monte Sereno has a jobs housing imbalance strongly tilted toward housing. Combined with the lack of robust transit, this means that new housing would only exacerbate traffic conditions and vehicle miles traveled in the Bay Area, both of which are counter to other state priorities. So that's my presentation. I'm so happy that some of you have already dug into the letter and have provided some markups. You know, we've tried to do our best in pulling the letter together in fairly short order. It's far from perfect. In the version that I have, I saw some typos on the conclusion page that, you know, obviously need to be corrected. I'm sure that you all have much more for me. So I'm available for questions and comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you putting it together in such short order. And I think it's a good basis for an appeal. I also appreciate the ad hoc committee. I think they worked with you on this, so that's great. At this point, I guess if you have questions, I see Brian's hand up. If you want to go ahead and ask a question, Brian, or Councilmember Mekachek, I guess that should be appropriate.
So one of the things that I think is very important for us to be persuasive in this is it has to be accurate, and I wouldn't want something to be factually wrong. The city of Monte Sereno may only have one bus stop in its actual city limits, but I know there are multiple bus stops on Winchester Boulevard, which is one of our major arterial roads that goes on the eastern side of Monte Sereno. So to claim that we only have one bus stop is actually, I don't think it's entirely accurate. And the other thing is that if you go north on Winchester Boulevard on a bus, you can get to Basona Station, which is part of the LRT that goes through the San Jose area. So that's kind of one comment on the bus stops. And I know it doesn't go in our favor, but I would prefer that we be accurate versus misleading. My second point is, and perhaps you can show the fire map again from your presentation. Could that be done?
There it is.
Okay, so on this, what I think would be more helpful would be if you showed the red area in the adjacent jurisdictions, and then you do an outline of the city of Monte Sereno, so that what that would give you is more red on the map. And you know, a fire doesn't stop when it crosses jurisdictions. So that would be, in my mind, more persuasive in that it shows we're part of a huge high-risk fire area, and part of Monte Sereno is in that, rather than that big white space in the center of the red zone.
Yeah, perfect.
So those are a couple of my initial comments, and I appreciate that there's a number of typos, etc., in there. But I think it's a very good start, and it puts together a lot of the points that were raised in our recent council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Member Matichek, and thank you for your understanding on the typos, your patience.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Mekachek, and I see Councilmember Turner's hand is up, and then Councilmember Lawler after that.
Yes, I wanted to make a comment about the 6 cycle RHNA numbers. What they're looking at really, and for Monte Sereno, is that our low income and very, very low income numbers have gone up significantly. And that's very difficult for Monte Sereno to actually fulfill, because our properties are pretty high, right? And one of the things that we had in our, just so that the council knows, we gave EMC 4 pages of of things that they could add into this, and we gave them the option of picking which ones, and I think they did a pretty good job. What I'd like to look into is to put in the annexation of unincorporated cities, And to just cite that as an example, we got Hacienda Inn, right? And in the fifth RHNA cycle, we took that development, 32 units, and it was supposed to be low income, very low income. And today they're selling for $2.5 to $3.5 million. So, so that's not very low income, even for Monte Sereno residents. So that's one thing we could just throw in there, right?
Yep, that's right.
The other one too is the, let's see. Oh, the fire evacuation route, you have it in there. However, you should emphasize that Monte Sereno's, we have one way going and one way coming. So we don't have two lanes, we don't have sidewalks. And, you know, with more units, with more housing, chances are people will park in the streets. And therefore, for the CERT team or our fire department and police department, they would have a hard time when the streets are filled with cars.
Yep.
And I will let Council Member Lawler speak about the reservoirs. That's her subject matter, and she's very interested in that. The other thing I would like to add is if you read Mayor Leuthold's letter, he has in there the number of RHNA numbers that we would like to see as the city. And I think he came up with 40 to 60, and we should stick with that to be consistent. So to reduce our numbers from 193 to anywhere from 40 to 60.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Turner. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
That's it. Thank you so much.
All right, Councilmember Lawler, please go ahead.
All right, thank you. Okay, this is great, by the way, so thank you for putting this all together. On basis 1, item 4, you identified, or the county through the HES unit or the HES tool identified potentially 7 lots or areas where we could build, correct?
That's correct.
So what I noticed was, you know, we have this fire argument, right? Well, all of those properties happen to be north of Highway 9. But we also need to recognize that it looks like at least 3, maybe 4 of those are in the Loma Serena neighborhood, which is a separate community within Monte Sereno with its own board. I don't know if those properties, if that land can even be included in our discussion here. I'm thinking that maybe those have been erroneously identified.
Okay, I will dig into that and make sure that I sort it out. Again, I can't say that I'm satisfied with the vacant sites analysis so much, simply because it is such a large part of the housing element work itself. And we've just are under contract, just have, you know, started the process of really doing, you know, the vast amount of work that needs to be done to really sort this problem well. But we will sharpen our pencil here in the next couple of days and try to do a better job and make sure that we have at least what's there is accurate.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be great, because I think really we only have 3 buildable lots in that case, which is significantly less than 7.
Yep.
And then this is actually a question maybe for Mr. Leonardis. Do you know if the hillside portion of Monte Sereno that's all south of Highway 9, is any of that on septic? Or is that all sewer?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Lawler. I would imagine there are some on septic. I would not know off the top of my head how many of each there would be and how significant those numbers would be. So we'd have to do some research on that. But one could make the assumption that over time, everyone gets connected to the sewer, with the very exception of the most remote of locations.
Okay, thanks. And Martin, do you feel that septic would be an argument for us anyway?
Well, it's something that we certainly have to, in the housing element process itself, we have to be able to demonstrate that there are adequate services and the like. So septic raises a flag, particularly for any kind of high density housing. It's one thing to put, a single family house down and use a septic, but another, to put a 5-unit apartment complex down or
Right.
something.
Right.
I'm a little shy about making the argument strongly, only because after we're through this appeal process, we do eventually have to put together a housing element and convince HCD that the city has a strategy to meet whatever RHNA number that from Monte Sereno ends up with, and has the services, sewer, water, et cetera, to provide, which is part of the reason that we left out the argument about water resources. You'll notice that that's missing from this letter, and it was suggested that it could be added. We've just shied away from making these arguments about inadequate services simply because we've got to turn around and make the opposite argument is once we dig into the housing element work.
Okay. Then that's fine. My next question would be regarding traffic and evacuation routes. So is there any way that we could potentially back up that statement with actual traffic data regarding Highway 9 vis-a-vis 17? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I don't know if you remember back in 2007, when a big crane fell in Los Angeles on a Friday afternoon, effectively shutting down the 101 and 405 freeways, bringing the entire west side of LA to a complete standstill where fire trucks, police, EMTs, you couldn't get anywhere. And it was really scary. And it took several hours. So in the event of an emergency like that, when we only have Highway 9 and potentially 17, which 17 goes through all that fire country, is there any information that we can provide that would back up that statement about evacuation routes? And also, a lot of the roads south of Highway 9 in our neighborhood are very narrow. So they're not exactly heavily traveled, and maybe sometimes one car at a time situation. So is that something you think that you'd be able to achieve?
Yes, we'll certainly dig into it. We should be able to come up with some basic traffic numbers at a minimum. And and I'll dig around to see if we can do a little bit better about supporting the argument about evacuation routes.
Okay, great. Just a couple more questions. Landslide information, you mentioned that Santa Clara County claims that 75% of Monte Sereno is in a landslide area, seismic landslide area. Is there data to back that up?
There must be mapping, so I can certainly look to perhaps Santa Clara County's GIS department can get me a map of landslide potential, something like that.
Yeah, I'm more just, just when you make the statement, just if there's something that can just sort of, here you go, back it up. Okay, and then
that's
question.
right.
Yeah, final question, and then I'll let Mayor Pro Tem move forward. Regarding the drought situation and our changed circumstances. I think it is critical that we include information about the fact that the Anderson Reservoir, which services much of the county, is offline for 10 years and will have an impact on all the communities in our area. We're going to be sharing a lot less water amongst the entire county. So I think that needs to be mentioned. And I had submitted Valley Water's drought scenario slide that had shown that, without massive mitigation measures, we're going to be in the red zone in terms of water. So I'm just wondering if there's any way that we can, really pin something into that argument that shows that because of that, our water resources are going to be stretched.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, I'm as I said, I'm a little bit shy about making the argument about lack of resources, but the drought is real. And I think that these people should be able to acknowledge that, this is extraordinary circumstance, and that otherwise the city is doing its job to provide urban services to its community. But, you know, this is one of these things simply out of the city's hands. So I don't, as you say it, I'm thinking, yeah, why wouldn't we want to make that argument? So I
Right.
agree, I'll put it in.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I lied, one last one, but you had mentioned it only because you had mentioned it. In the last cycle, Monte Sereno was correctly discounted due to lack of transit. Is there a way that we can remind them of this?
Well, we will be, as we
Okay.
mention it in the
Okay,
appeal letter.
Okay.
That's probably good enough.
okay, great, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Lawler. Those are all great comments, and I know you thought your work was cut out. Now it's cut out some more for you. Anybody else have any other questions right now before I have a couple of comments? Yeah, Councilmember Turner, please go
You
ahead.
want to go first?
Yeah, you go ahead, Councilmember Turner.
Okay, I just wanted to let you know that every time I hear HCD speak on the sixth cycle, they always say that we will not consider high fire and wildfires as one of the points in which you can appeal. And I just want to say that I think it's worthwhile that we put it in there. But just be cautious that I don't know who's going to be presenting this. That's something we have to talk about. Maybe EMC can go in front of him to present this, or Mayor Lawler. I mean, I keep saying Mayor Lawler, Mayor Luthold, or maybe our city manager. Those are the three that I've seen SCAG do, but they've always said we will not consider wildfires. So we have to be very strong on that one.
Yes, I agree. And I agree that it should be left in. I mean, technically speaking, this larger argument about how the statewide numbers were incorrectly calculated really doesn't fit into the narrow window of what's grounds for appeal. They really are asking Monte Sereno to, you know, to focus on the San Francisco Bay region, not the state as a whole. So I'm not sure that they're exactly open to this kind of argument. It doesn't mean we don't make it as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And the same goes for fire.
Yes, agree.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion questions by anybody? All right, so let me just address a couple of those. I think a lot of.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Brian, did you want to say something?
Yes, please. Just so that I can understand the numbers a little bit better. We went to 193 units in this cycle. What did we go from in the last cycle?
I believe it was 60. Oh, what was it before the last cycle? I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to look into it.
60.
60. Okay.
Yes.
And then in Santa Clara County, they went to 129,577. Do you know what they went from?
Can easily find out.
Okay, and then the other one is for the whole ABAG, they went to 141,000 and whatever the numbers are. But I'm wondering, did percentage-wise, did our allocation go up, stay the same, or go down? And that's just so that I know what the numbers are. And if our percentage went up, then that is obviously not a good thing. But did it stay the same, or did it in fact go down? That would be good data to have.
What you suggest, what comes to mind is to actually include another table in the appeal letter that lays out something like you just sketched, you know, for Monte Sereno, for Santa Clara County, for the ABAG region as a whole. What was their allocation last time, maybe even the time before? Maybe run it, you know, the last 2 periods plus the current one or something. But it would make a clean table, and it would be pretty illustrative of how it all plays out with your neighbors. So I could put together a table like that, and if it supports the case and all, then it would be logical to include it.
Great, and obviously if it doesn't, then we wouldn't want to highlight that.
Right.
The other thing is, when I looked at the appeals in for Southern California area governments, SCAG, there was a cover sheet. Is there a standard cover sheet for ABAG? And if so, has that cover sheet been prepared?
You're talking about the, I'm sorry, you're talking about the application, the appeal form. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes. I went over that with the office staff this morning. What it appeared, when you open the correct link, it actually takes you to a DocuSign. And so I think the process is one where City Council will take action and approve the appeal being submitted. And once that happens, then we will fill out part of that form, and then it gets sent to the mayor for signature, verifying that City Council has taken action. And then I think that it gets automatic, once all the buttons are pushed, it automatically gets submitted to ABAG. So we haven't done that process yet, obviously, but as I understand it, that's how it would work. Does that help?
It does a bit, and I think my fellow council members, do you understand what I'm referring to in terms of the sort of standard appeal application?
Yes, there is the appeals application for SCAGs is exactly the same as the appeals for applications for ABAG, except instead of SCAGs, it says ABAG. Now, the people looking at whether they will approve it or not are different, but the forms are the same.
Understood. So it would be good to have that form filled out so that we can see it. That would be helpful for me.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. So when you prepare the draft, just have a form filled out and attached to it, and then when you go on the e-filing, the mayor who is doing it knows what boxes to check.
If I have one quick comment about that.
Go for it.
Actually, thank you. I believe it was attached to the information that we got, the letter. If you scroll down, it's submission number 70, Association of Bay Area Governments, and I think you guys said you had some issues filling it out. Will you be going over this with us? Because I think there's things that we might be able to add.
Yes, good. Well, I'll make sure that Rachel digs into it, and we'll work closely with you to get it right. We've included the form as an attachment to the letter currently, but
and it looks partially filled out. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, and again, the actual form appears to be a functional form that sort of operates as a formal DocuSign document, and so once you execute it and you push the buttons, it literally gets sent places. So we didn't want to do that yet, but we included the form for information for the time being. But we'll work closely with you to get it right before that gets submitted, and it'll need the mayor's signature as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, great, thanks.
All right, great, thank you. Let's see what I have. So basically, I think we're along a good portion of the appeal process, and you've got some good ideas from everybody else. Let me just kind of go through some of the items I had, and then I also did a markup, which you may not have had a chance to look at, but just generally discussing the items you put together. There was a good comment by Councilmember Lawler on the use of the HES tool and the locations that have been identified as to whether they are true locations or not because of high slopes or fire danger or emergency access. And what may be good is if you're able to get us down to the number that was in the Luthor letter, which is I think between 40 to 60, by paring down and saying, okay, yeah, these locations, well, may look like there's 7 and they can handle so many. We can only build so many extra units there. And again, like you pointed out on the vacancy issues, if the double count is correctly counted, or if the 1.5% vacancy rate is correctly utilized, then what should the number, what should our number be instead of 193? How much of a discount that is, with the goal of getting it all pared down to a number that is acceptable to us, or at least that we can live with. And again, on the transportation, there was a discount last time. So whatever that discount was, if you can use that again, or maybe increase it by 10% and use it, since they appear to have increased everything else. On the emergency exit thing, that situation is really getting bad. That's because our exit out of Monte Sereno is on Highway 17, basically off Lark Avenue. And they built the 40 units, which is in the Los Gatos part of the city, but the only access those people are going to have to Highway 17 is going to be through Lark Avenue, and that's going to be very, very congested as it is. And then the other traffic that comes in from Netflix, that's also congesting it. So even in normal and in pandemic times, we've been able to get through with it, but I think in normal times that will not happen. And that is going to be the only access, and it's going to be totally shut down, especially also understanding that Highway 17 is a fire zone, and if something happens, people are going to be driving north from the Santa Cruz area.
Yeah, that's right.
So we want to look at that. The drought circumstances, I think it's a good issue. I understand your reluctance in a little ways of trying to then have to justify what we say we can do and then say, yeah, we can do it. But I think we have to go all the way on this thing as much as we can. Because I don't know if the same people are going to be reviewing your application 3 years or what we've done 5 years later. When the process kind of starts, I mean, they might come back in 2028. Maybe different people are looking at it, and whether they'll be looking at it and say, well, you said this, and said, yeah, we said it, but we're trying to be superhuman here.
Yep.
So I think just go full board. I mean, I'm almost a believer in burn your ships and move forward with it as much as you can. And all the arguments, I mean, they're all on the periphery, and they can go anywhere. Now on the pandemic issue, on the double count on the housing issue, maybe pandemic should be mentioned as to whether the count may not be accurate, even if it had been accurate at one time, because a lot of people are now staying at home, or they've moved out of the area, and maybe the need is not that high. All right, okay. So with that, and then I have that marked up thing that I've sent. I hope you got that, Marvin.
I understand. I think Michelle perhaps has it. I haven't gotten it in my hands yet, but before I leave here, I'm going to make sure that I do. Yeah.
So some of them are just very, very minor things. I mean, I run a spell check, so that doesn't really make, the typos don't really make a difference. The one argument that I'm trying to see if you can make it, and Attorney Rudin had a good suggestion. I was trying to make it as a separate argument, because the way I'm also an attorney, and sometimes we make arguments that don't make any sense. But I thought that argument was, the intent of the code was to provide as much low-income and very low-income housing as much as possible. And in the code, government code section, it talks about cities and counties, and then cities and counties as alternate, as jurisdictions that need to do all that. The interpretation has been made that that a jurisdiction is only a city or only a county with the land that's only in the county and not in any city. I am trying to broaden the interpretation to say to really have this to be effective, the region shouldn't be defined as city, but should be defined as a county. And the reason being, like a city like Monte Sereno has no land, but we may be able to subsidize other cities that do have the land and who really want to grow. And so if you look at it on a regional basis, that allocation should be different. Now maybe that, I set forth as a separate basis of an argument. Attorney Rudin suggested that maybe if it fits at all, it would fit under basis number 2, which has to do with the counting issues. Because, and I attached a regional action plan, which interestingly was a presentation made at the ABAG conference by housing centers. And they basically said, you can't do this by city. You've got to do if you're going to affect low income and very low income housing, you have to do it on a region basis, and they define region as a county, which made a lot of sense to me. And that's how they're now approaching how you can cut down homelessness by doing a region approach as to where houses are built. So if you can wean that in, and I've got it someplace, but I would leave it to your expertise to see how we could wean it into your argument so that we do raise it. It may not be effective this time, but it may have some, it may be helpful in the future, or maybe some other cities can also benefit from that argument and raise it, some of the small cities like ours.
Yeah, good. Very, very helpful. I think I understand where you're going with it, so I will craft something up.
Great. So those are pretty much all the comments and questions I have at this point. Anybody else have any discussions, questions? Okay. So the next step is, do we approve the appeal yet, or do we want to set up another meeting to look at the final packet? What are your suggestions, guys?
I think we should look at all the comments that we made today, make sure that they're all in there, and then we approve it later on. We also need to figure out who's going to be doing the presentation to HCD.
Yeah, I would think if Mayor Luthal is available, then he should be doing it. But I'll leave it up to him, and he can make a decision as to whether he wants to do it or have somebody else do it. I mean, it could be Surgery Rudin if he feels like it, or city manager. But I'd leave it up to the mayor to make that decision. I think obviously the city council can veto the mayor's decision if you feel like it, but I think it will be his decision. Yeah, Councilmember Lawler.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that we should probably have another meeting to go over the final iteration of this letter, as well as the application, to make sure that we've crossed every T and dotted every I and made sure every argument is made. Thanks.
All right, so that sounds like a good suggestion. Councilmember Mekachek.
Yes, it would be super helpful if EMC could spin around another version of the document, incorporating as much as possible, and then distribute that. I'm going to be leaving tomorrow morning, and I will not be able to attend, but I'm obviously not going to stand in the way at all. But I think we made really good progress, and whatever council decides upon for the final wording, I will support.
So yeah, so all in all, I think that's a great suggestion, and also will benefit from Mayor Luthal being present at that meeting, hopefully. We normally had meetings on Tuesday, but I think our July 6th meeting was off. We canceled that, so maybe we should schedule a meeting on July 6th. Would that give you enough time?
Martin, yes.
Yeah.
What day of the week is July 6th? I'm just checking my calendar here.
Yeah,
So Tuesday.
Yeah, we usually meet at 7, but if 6 works better for you, to move it up or move it back a little bit, depending on other council members, how their schedule is.
Yeah, I think we can be flexible on the time. I think we have to make that because really we need to be able to, get this submitted. So we will do what it takes to get something back to you. If we get it back to you the morning of the 6th, does that give you enough time to agendize it?
Yeah,
or to get
No.
really it just
yeah,
So for meetings, we need 24-hour notice in order to agendize them. Now, we could probably put out notice without getting the document, but it would be very helpful beforehand. Additionally, Mayor Pro Tem, I'm actually going to be unavailable between July 2nd and until July 7th. So.
okay.
So Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I know City Manager Mr. Leonardis had mentioned that the due date for the letter from EMC to us was the 7th. So maybe we should, would that give everybody enough time, and would that be amenable to everybody else in terms of the meeting time? Because I'm okay with that.
I think the only concern was Attorney Rudin. Are you going to be here on the 7th?
I can be here on the 7th, yes.
Okay, let's do it on the 7th then. I think that would be good.
great. Well, that buys us another day. That helps.
Yeah, and that you need to get it to us by the 6th, at least
Yep.
24 hours for the meeting. Morning of the 6th would work.
So the meeting, I just want to confirm, would be Wednesday, July 7th at 7 p.m.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This is Michelle. I'm also not in town that week, but the deputy city clerk Floyd will be attending on my behalf.
Okay, yeah, I know. Sorry to put this on you guys, but I know Councilmember Mekchuk is also out. But let's get this done, and hopefully we can get all the information to everybody on the.
Actually, I'm just looking at the calendar now. Right now, we actually have a site and architectural commission meeting at the same time at 7 o'clock. So there is a conflict at that time.
Yeah, does that cause a conflict for us if we meet at the same time?
Well, yes, because the Zoom is, we can't have the two meetings happening at the same time with the Zoom webinar.
And is that at 6 o'clock also, the site and architecture?
The site and architecture at 7 is at 7 p.m. on Wednesday.
Should we try doing it at 5:30 then? Does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine, especially if we're gonna get the letter circulated prior to that.
Yeah, I think so, because I think we'll have as many comments as we had today. So let's see if we can set it at 5:30. And maybe the site architecture can move their meeting back about an hour or half an hour.
5:30 is fine.
Okay. Councilmember Mekchuk?
I was wondering if, Martin, if you could have your assistant circulate the version kind of right now with our feedback, knowing that you'll send another version on the 7th or whenever, but to wait several days seems to me, when you've got quite a bit of feedback, just get a less than perfect version out would be helpful.
I'm not sure that I understand. I'm sorry. We have a draft of the letter. We'll revise it based on these comments and get it to you by the 6th. Try to do as early on the 6th as possible, so that it can be circulated, at least 24 hours ahead of the meeting. Are you asking for something different than that?
It was, but I understand your situation. So you want to send it out then? I'm good with that.
Well, it's just that, I mean, we have a version that is available to you now, but particularly with the holiday, we're not going to be able to turn around and have, addressed any of these issues. Let me put it another way. We'll need to get to the 6th to get through and do justice to the issues, to the cleanups that have been raised today.
All right, that works. Give me 1 second. I want to just send a little text to Sean to see if he can respond and see if that time works for him. Would it, City Manager Leonardis, does that work for you? And do you have any other comments?
No, Wednesday the 7th at 5:30 should be great timing in the sense where we have to also account for Monday being a day off. It gives the consultants time, EMC, to get all this together. And I think we can get it out by Friday. It should not be an issue. Of course, that night of the 7th, and when this version comes in, it's pretty much going to have to be okay. Everything looks good.
All right, sounds good.
At that point in time, there's not going to be much time for revision after that point. So.
All right, sounds good. Let's set it up for July 7th if everybody's in agreement. Nod your heads, I guess. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So we'll do it at July 7th. And were there any other questions for staff or for Mr. Mariner, Mr. Martin Carver? And Mr. Carver, do you have any other questions?
I do not. Thank you all very much for the time and for the very helpful input. We will get on it and turn this around, and then we'll see you again on this next Wednesday.
Great. Thank you very much. And I guess there's no members of the public or anybody else who has any comments. So we can go ahead and, unless somebody has any other items to discuss, we can adjourn the meeting. All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Have a good weekend. Oh, bye-bye.